Welcome to the Rams postgame show. My name is Victor Corona, aka Vic the producer. Joining me live from SoFi Stadium as the Rams take a big loss, 31-10, is Gilbert Manzano. Gilbert, how are you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I don't know about the Chargers, the Rams playing the Chargers. Sorry, I've been doing that mistake a lot all week. Which team I'm covering, Chargers or Rams. If you don't know, I covered the Chargers for 4 years. Now I'm covering the Rams this year. And the Battle of LA didn't really work out for the Rams on their end. It worked out for the Chargers on their end. It got pretty ugly in the second half, but it was okay to start off with. The rushing performances from both sides. Eckler and Cam Akers. It was pretty fun to watch in the first half, and then in the second half, it got pretty repetitive, and you knew the outcome by what midway through the third quarter that the Rams did not have enough firepower to compete with the Chargers.
Yeah, it was pretty obvious. I mean, they kept it close early on in the second quarter. They went on that. What was that? I'm trying to look here. They went on a 7-play, 75-yard drive there that was capped off by the Malcolm Brown 23-yard touchdown, which made it 14-10. And you were like, okay, they're in business here. We might get some kind of performance like we got against the Broncos, but it wasn't. The Chargers just took over in the second half and never looked back.
Yeah, the Rams kept saying like there is really no margin for error. Like they knew they did not have the players to compete with Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Khalil Mack. Oh, Joey Bosa came back for the Chargers. So, when you're trading field goals for touchdowns and you're seeing Eckler rip off a touchdown for 72 yards, and you're the Rams and you're working very hard to get upfield and you need things to go right. At some point, it's gonna catch up to you. It's gonna be like an avalanche coming down at you. So there wasn't too many positives to take away. Like even the defense, nobody really popped. Like last week, you felt a lot of young guys stepped up. Even the Green Bay game, some young guys stepped up, but there wasn't too much there. Like the running game struggled for the Rams because no Ashawn Robinson, no Aaron Donald. Greg Gaines was limited with a shoulder injury, so that's your top three guys right there. And no wonder Austin Eckler had a day there, and that streak of holding a player under 100 yards for the whole season ended today. So, it's tough to kind of pinpoint a big takeaway here, but obviously you go to Cam Akers because that running game was really working for Sean McVay and Cam Akers, and he kind of felt like the old days of the Rams when they had Brandon Staley as a DC and Sean McVay being the play caller on offense, just going at it in the practice field, and they were keeping up for the first half, and then just after a while, I was like, all right, you don't have your big ballers out there like Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, guys like that. So at this point, it's kind of like, okay, Chase Daniels in the game. So Chargers go to the playoffs. Rams figure out what to do for next year.
Yeah, and I mean they became the first team to lose 11 games after winning the Super Bowl. So I mean that's another thing that happened tonight. And then you run into a hot Chargers team right now who's heading towards the playoffs as you said, and they're getting all their players back and they're right in head of steam as they go into the playoffs. So it was something that we kind of expected, but you were kind of hoping that what we saw against the Broncos, which would kind of as move be a momentum step for them. But one thing, as we talked about, and I'll move over to this, is Cam Akers said that he would love to be around for life, and I just thought he's been the he was not only the best thing about the Rams today, but he's been the best thing since everybody's been out. Like he seen what he has become. The last 4 games has been really impressive after that 2-game hiatus that we saw in late October.
Yeah, if it wasn't for Cam Akers today, we probably wouldn't have a post game show. Like, what else can we talk about today? Like, Baker Mayfield struggled. The offensive line was pretty shaky. The defense didn't really have those big moments, like a takeaway kind of moment. It was Cam Akers' day, and Baker Mayfield was saying like Cam Akers was pretty much everything for us. Like he was even contributing in pass protection. He had a nice blitz pickup. I want to say on a deep pass to Bryson Hopkins in the first half somewhere there. But I saw the replay. I'm like, man, look at Cam Akers putting in work. And remember, Victor, early in the season, he was in the doghouse because he wouldn't protect Matthew Stafford. And so maybe that month off, or like he had a time to kind of dwell and think about what he was doing out there in the practice field, because Sean McVay kept saying like Cam Akers needs to have more urgency. He needs to do it in practice and games, anything you could think of. And maybe he came back and he just had a fire under him, like, hey, I think I like being with the Rams. Like you mentioned, he said he wants to be a Ram for life. I was there when he said that. And it didn't really catch me by surprise because I know Cam Akers' feelings. He really wants to be with the Rams. There's been a couple of times where us reporters, we ask him, hey, do you want to be back with the team next year? And after the interview's over, he goes and talks to his teammates like, somebody asked me, I don't want that maybe I don't want to be here. Of course I want to be here. I love this team. So that's not a surprise to me. He really wants to be there. And then, but the biggest thing, can you redeem yourself to the coaching staff, to the front office, GM Les Snead, and head coach Sean McVay? And I think Sean McVay is a big fan of Cam Akers. Like that's the guy that they want to build on. And the way he's been running, like he looks like a good number one running back to me. It's just kind of weird that Kyron Williams can't get involved, but whatever, that's a story for another day. But Baker Mayfield was like, hey, I appreciate the way this guy runs hard. Uh, you know, Sean McVay called him a special back, a complete back. So when you say things like that, you're pretty much safe to come back. So I think that story of will he come back or he won't, it's pretty much dead, because at this point, you got to keep the guy around. He was playing that well. And he has one more game to go. Like, if he lays an egg in Seattle, maybe he has a bad memory. You think about the trade, but he makes it 3 games in a row with 100 yards rushing. Like, what else can you do,
Yeah. No, and I just want to point something out, because before the season started, one of the things you said was that you said, "Hey, I think Cam Akers is in for a big season. He's going to be the number one running back." And now we're seeing what you were watching during training camp leading up to the start of the season. This is the guy, and I just want to make sure I give him his props here with some stats to back it up. He's had 306 yards the last 3 games, along with 3 touchdowns. Tonight, he had 19 carries for 123 yards, including a 42-yard run, Gilbert, which is the longest for the Rams this season.
Yeah, and I want to just point out this comment here from San Antogato. He did have a drop pass in the first drive, which would have been to the house. It would have been a touchdown. He had open, space on the left sideline, and it kind of sucks because you can't keep up with the Chargers. You need a touchdown to keep pace. And if they would have got that touchdown and you jump out to a 7-0 lead, like, does that make any difference? Maybe not. It felt like, made the Chargers, kind of pump the brakes in the fourth quarter. Like, if they really kind of wanted to, they could have been, it would have been a blowout for sure. Like 31-10 is kind of respectable, but they could have easily got 40-something points. But yeah, who knows if he would have caught that touchdown and set the tone and made it a difference. But other than that, like, you can't really complain about what Cam Akers is doing. Another comment, Miss Compas, thanks for your show and perspective on the team. Great job as usual. We still have Compas on the beat. I'm assuming maybe you're a Chargers fan and you want more of a Chargers-centric kind of show. We do talk about it, but you also have What's Up Bolts with Fernando and Dan and Diego.
Yeah, and getting back to Cam Akers here, and just the offense in general, Baker Mayfield had another so-so game. I still like what he's doing. I mean, he finished the night 11 of 19 for 132 yards. He also had Van Jefferson with 3 catches for about 77 yards, including that nice 39-yard reception. So the offense is still, they're missing a bunch of pieces. So, you're getting what you have around you right now, but they're still doing a good job of, and as we talked about, it'll be nice. It would be nice if not nice. That's not the word I should use, but if I'm Baker Mayfield, as Fernando from Compas on the Beach said, he probably should come back for another year and be the backup for this team.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird game for like Baker Mayfield. Like it felt maybe like the Packers game, but with maybe not as much pressure. Like I know the Chargers pressure was there, but not as much as that Green Bay game. He just couldn't get anything going. He had some time today. It just maybe there was a couple of misfires, and you could tell it bothered Baker Mayfield. He let some plays out there that he could have made. Like even on that rollout to Van Jefferson, he could have just ran the ball and get 20 yards, but he said, you know what? I see Van Jefferson, and it became 39 yards. That was a kind of a little greedy, and it worked out. Maybe he felt like he could have been a little more aggressive to hurt the Chargers, but again, even if you're making some of these long completions, by the way, where's Tutu Atwell been? This has been his opportunity to shine. He's not doing it. Van Jefferson, he's been stepping up. Brandon Powell gets a couple here and there, but when you don't have Ben Skoranek, Allen Robinson, Cooper Kupp, it really adds up. But then you see the Charger side, and Justin Herbert's throwing these balls up to Mike Williams, a jump ball, and he's just getting it with one hand. Like, those are the playmakers you need. Baker does not have that, but it kind of makes you wonder, right, Victor? Like, if he had Cooper Kupp out there and Allen Robinson and all the guys out there, like, would Baker be much better, or is it impressive that of what he's doing right now to make it work with what he has? Because I'm impressed with what he's doing, but it kind of makes you wonder, maybe he could do more, or is like, okay, this is pretty much Baker Mayfield's ceiling, where like there's gonna be some good weeks and kind of some so-so weeks.
No, and I want to see what he can do with those players. I mean, eventually, if in let's hope nothing happens to Stafford, he comes back. But I would like to see him for the first time have, I guess, since Oklahoma, have a bunch of talent around him, where a bunch of weapons, where he can just not be the focal point and just be able to throw the ball and hand the ball off to Cam Akers. As we talked about in Cleveland, he had those two-star running backs, but outside of that, on the perimeter, he didn't have much to work with. So it would be nice to see what he can do. I did want to point out, before we move over to the defense, that he got out of the tackle box there in that second quarter, and they called a penalty, which cost the Rams a field
Yeah,
goal there. And I wanted to talk about that, because he was out of the tackle box. They shouldn't have called a penalty there on him.
yeah, you're talking about the intentional grounding, right? Where like they
Intentional
lost they
grounding,
lost it
yes.
down and they could have had a field goal. And again, like, do you really want to trade your field goals for touchdowns with Justin Herbert? Like, maybe it wouldn't have made a difference, but that was one of the plays where like you felt like, okay, here, all right, it's starting to become a snowball, like an avalanche rain, and kind of come down on you, and that was part of it, the building there. So a lot of missed opportunities. I'm sure he's probably kicking himself there. But maybe he's kind of like you, like, what the heck, like, that shouldn't have been called intentional grounding. Uh, there was also a Jalen Ramsey. Remember the Jalen Ramsey strip sack where it kind of came
Yeah.
close, where maybe Herbert unleashed the ball, or maybe he didn't. It was pretty hard to tell, but there's small little opportunities like that where it could have made a difference. But I feel like even at like the fourth quarter really told me like the Chargers are on a different level. Like, this
Yes.
team is getting ready to make a run in the playoffs. And Victor, you told me this when we were hanging out at our Christmas
Yeah,
hanging out. Like,
which I'm gonna talk about on COMPAS
yeah,
for
like
the next episode.
you think the Chargers are gonna be that team that make a run, and today watching them having kind of like what, like a C level performance, and to still win by that much, I'm like, okay, maybe this team is ready to make a run, because I know Gato's out here hanging out with us, and I appreciate that. I'm sure it's a little late for some people, but I'm guessing Gato's a Chargers fan, and he's probably excited seeing what's going on with the team. And for me, when I covered this Charger squad for 4 years, they always felt like they always kind of got in their way. They found a way to kind of screw it up or make it difficult. This team, at least in the last month, it's very quick kind of surge that came out of nowhere. Looks like they're legit. But I know it's the Rams show. I'm more focused on the Rams, but I was really impressed with the Chargers, and it really felt like they have a whole other gear, and
Oh,
it's
he's
just
all
the Rams couldn't keep up to that. Oh, Rams fan.
right.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. I appreciate you got us being here, because I know a lot of people are really hurting after that Rams performance today. So I really appreciate that. It's even better for you to be here.
Yeah, and we'll get into the Chargers on the big Compass on the Beat show that comes out. Plug comes out on Wednesday. But I wanted to talk about the defense and how they allowed their first 100-yard rusher. I mean, the defense was this was one of the worst performances they've had so far this year, Gilbert, because the defense had no sacks, they had no forced turnovers, and I mean, we just talked we glowingly about the Chargers, but the Chargers came in having not scored a touchdown in the third quarter since week 5. They also had not scored. What was the other one that I had on here? This was their highest point total of the since week 5. So
Really?
the defense, yeah. So the defense had not been doing well. I mean, the defense did not show up for the Rams tonight.
Okay, yeah. Since so 31 points since when again? You said week 5?
See 5.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a while. Like, usually this defense, you kind of rely on them uh to do well and make it interesting. And then also remember they had that drought with the takeaways. They couldn't find a takeaway, but they were doing it in recent weeks, and that's why they've been kind of hanging tough with this team. But Victor, it's hard to figure out this team because I keep saying like this team makes it. They're tough. They hang tough, and then I can't figure out the spread because I keep getting it wrong. Like today, I picked the Chargers to beat the Rams, but I said the Rams are going to cover. That did not work out. So you know it's tough to figure out who to blame because I think Baker Mayfield was saying like, man, we really put the Rams defense in a hard position. Like we couldn't keep up. You have no room to make errors, and it started becoming a snowball effect. So, but for the first, I'll say this, Victor, for the first time, I really felt like Bobby Wagner was like kind of like felt defeated. Like he usually talks to us and he's very positive. He's a leader. But with what one game to go, he kind of was like, yeah, I'm tired of this, man. Like, we all found different ways to kind of ask him questions about what he's feeling, what can he do to make it better, and he just didn't want to talk. But to his credit, he was still up there, fielding the questions. It just wasn't like he wasn't gonna give us what we were asking for because it just wasn't there. He was just too kind of like it's not the way it's supposed to go down. And you're like, playing, your crosstown rival, and you kind of have a performance like that where the defense is kind of flat. I'm sure it really got to him, but credit to him for always talking. He's having a great year. He also had a missed tackle on Austin Eckler, and that was rare for Bobby Wagner. Shout out to Jordan Rodriguez. I think she told me that was the second missed tackle of the season. So when you're like recording over 100 tackles every year and you only have 2 missed tackles, you're a special tackler. So for him to kind of miss that one, maybe that got to him. But it was just kind of a weird move for Bobby Wagner, and that really kind of told me like, yeah, he's ready for this year to kind of end.
Yeah, and the reason I brought up that play where the intentional grounding was called on Baker Mayfield, on the next drive, they Austin Eckler has that 75-yard run. So stuff like that, and talking about explosive plays. I mean, these Chargers had 6, and the Rams came in having the fewest allowed explosive plays of any team this season. So I mean, it was just an all around bad game for the defense, and it's gonna happen, man. Like even for the best defense, they'll have a clunker, and this was a clunker today for the Rams.
Yeah, Victor, real quick, I wonder how Bobby Wagner responds because he seems like
Oh
he
yeah,
wants the season to end, but like you got one more to get up for, and he's gonna get up for that one. He's playing the Seahawks in
yep.
Seattle, and they can play spoiler. Like I'm kind of curious to see how they line up the schedule for next week for the Rams and Seahawks. Like also me as a reporter, I'm glad there's something to write about. Like this is a legit. Like we kept pushing maybe a spoiler today because the Chargers are playing for the 5th seed, and it didn't really feel that way. But this one, divisional rival, Bobby Wagner going to Seattle, and the Seahawks are still in contention for a playoff spot. That feels like a legit spoiler. So for them, I'm sure McVay and Bobby Wagner want to get up for that because they came close to beating the Seahawks in LA. So I'm sure knowing Bobby Wagner and the pro that he is going to come back, recharge, and get this group going. But it was kind of weird that today it was like, man, what the heck happened for him?
Yeah, no, and I mean, if you want to know what the implications are for next week, if the Packers win, it's against the Lions. They're in, so it doesn't matter what happens there. I'm sure they're going to line up the games at the same time. My guess is that we get, as Fernando called it a few weeks ago, I think we get Titans at Jaguars for the Sunday night game, and I think the 1 p.m. games are going to be the Lions and Packers, and the Seahawks and Rams. And then what
Okay.
happens? Yeah, and then what happens is if the Lions win, then they need the Seahawks to lose, and all the Seahawks need is for the Lions to beat the Packers, and they're in. So that those
Yeah.
are the playoff scenarios
Yeah,
for that
I bet
last.
I bet they scheduled those 3 games all together at the same time, so that way you're kind of keeping scores on Sunday afternoon. And so is it one of these things? I know we're kind of getting off topic. Is it the Packers, Lions, and Seahawks have the same record, and Packers have the tiebreaker?
Yes, yeah,
Huh,
because
okay.
of the best divisional record. If the Packers beat the Lions, it's the same thing with the Chargers. Like if the Chargers and Ravens both end up 11-6, the Chargers get the 5th seed because
Huh.
of the better divisional record at that point.
Mm.
So I know it's going to be a wacky week 18. So at least we have that to look forward to as we close out this season. But give me your final thoughts on this loss, and as we look ahead, as you talked about, I guess the best thing to look forward to is going to be trying to play spoiler, and then Bobby Wagner having his reunion with the Seahawks up there in
Yeah,
Seattle.
that's gonna be a good storyline. Obviously, I want to see if Cam Akers could kind of keep it going because again, like if he has a clunker, like it kind of stays on your mind for the offseason. But if he goes in hot, like you can't deny this guy. Like, he needs to be on the roster with the Rams. So we touched on that, but I think for me is like I want to see some more young guys make the most of the opportunity. I know Gato does too, and again, shout out to Gato because he's sticking around here, leaving the comments, man. Uh, like I know Kobe Durant had the 2 interceptions last week, and you can't ask for more. He had a pick six too, but like let's see a little more there. But also it's tough, man. Like when you're missing your interior defensive line, and they're getting the running game going, like that's like that really beats you down when that running game just crushing you slowly. You're getting defeated. Like hopefully Greg Gaines is healthy and like improves next week because he was very limited out there with his shoulder. And Greg Gaines was holding it down without Ashawn and Aaron Donald. So for him to be limited and also Marquise Copeland also being kind of on a snap count, he has an ankle injury. Like the numbers get to you, man, and it doesn't help out like even the guys on the outside. You got Leonard Floyd, who was also, by the way, dealing with an illness. He was sick. That
Right.
that affects on Michael
Tyler
Hoyt,
Higbee as well.
Higby too. So you guys are all banged up. They're trying to make it and finish it out. And yeah, you want to see more like a guy like a Bryson Hopkins too. You want to see a 2-2 out. Well, you want to see a Kyron Williams. You don't want to mess up with the Cam Akers surge here, but you want to see Kyron. You know, it was nice to see Chandler Brewer come back. That was a nice surprise, right? Like Chandler Brewer was kind of an underrated guy at right guard. He took over for Ode Abushi. We were all making a big fuss about Ode being suspended, but now he didn't even play the game, so it didn't matter. That was kind of a weird wrinkle. But yeah, you want to see the young guys step up, and you want to feel like what you felt like after the Broncos game and end the season that way.
Yeah, no, and I mean, for me, it's just continue the evaluation, man. Like today was a bad game for the Rams, and you just move on, and then now you're playing. Spoiler, man. Like, what a way to end the season. Not being able to knock out the Seahawks out of the playoffs, and you take that win, and also you hurt the draft position for the Lions as well. So there's a lot to play for here in this final game. So I would be optimistic about this game, and I will talk about it for on the preview as we preview the game versus the Seahawks. But there's a lot of intrigue with this game, Gilbert. So I wouldn't sleep on this game. I know we're heading into Week 18. They have the record for most losses by a Super Bowl champ, defending Super Bowl champ. But there's a lot to look forward to in Week 18 for the Rams.
Yeah, so you're saying nobody's ever had more than 11 losses as a Super Bowl champion?
No,
Okay, yeah,
yeah,
that's kind of a disappointment, but I'm sure, like again, like it's a new year,
take the Super.
like I mentioned
Yeah,
last week, you got the Super Bowl, probably the best year ever, a weird year, I could say that, but yeah, close out, finish strong. Like I'm sure they don't really care about getting a better second round pick. Like I'm sure McVay, like today, like I want to say today is probably the first time I kind of really annoyed Sean McVay, and maybe I could have asked a better question, but because I was working on a story about the whole Brandon Staley Sean McVay kind of matchup, and I think what I was trying to ask, like, hey, did it feel like when you guys went head to head and on the practice field every single day, his defense, his Rams defense against your Rams offense, and I'm like, did you have any flashbacks about that? He's like, no. And I'm like, okay, that's a competitor side. You don't want to ask somebody after a loss, like, hey, do
right.
you want to reminisce a little bit? So that was probably bad on my part. But it just shows you McVay's competitive side. Like he doesn't want to lose to his friends either. I don't know if that adds more sting to it. But he has a lot of respect for Brandon Staley, and it's cool to see what they're doing with the Chargers there. But they don't want to lose that Seattle game. That's a rival. Go out and finish it and close it out. And hopefully we could have a little more lively show next week to end House of Horns season 1.
Yeah, and before you give us your 12-pack of beer player of the game, I know it's coming on a loss. I'm sure we have the same guy, so
Yeah.
we'll probably save that here. But I just wanted to talk about like one thing he should take away from this. If you're Sean McVay, is like look at your tree, man. They're starting to catch up to you, and they're being very competitive against you. So if anything, you should feel like, hey, I'm doing my job because these guys are performing at a high level now. You have, Staley going to the playoffs. You've had LaFleur be the number one seed before. He went up against his other pupil in the Super Bowl and Zach Taylor. So, and I know you got to go. So let me just give us your 12 pack of the beer, which is pretty player of the game, which is pretty obvious, right?
Yeah, it's definitely Cam Akers. Like, I don't know. Maybe like a Van Jefferson deserves one too. Like, he was making some plays out there, but you got to give the big tall can. I'll give Cam Akers Modelo. So I get the tall can out there for you, and then I also give one to Bobby Wagner because that guy needs it, man. Like to see him kind of disappointed that way, the heart and soul of the Rams defense, or even the Rams team all year, and just to get there for his first year and kind of have that much respect, it got to him. So Bobby Wagner, Cam Akers, on my part, two tall cans for you guys. You deserve it.
Yeah, I was gonna go with Cam Akers, but then you changed my mind with what you asked Sean McVay. So I'm gonna give it to Sean McVay since
All right.
it's been a long year for him. It's this is the most losses he's ever had in a season. So I'm sure he's gonna need a one. He's gonna need a cold one tonight, and as they prep for a big off season here for the Rams. So with that said, Gilbert, please plug away. Let the people know what you're working on, and then close us out.
Yeah, last thing on Sean McVay, I feel like just hearing interviews from people around the league when they talk about the Rams, I think they gain a whole nother level of respect for Sean McVay and how he's keeping his team competitive with Baker Mayfield amid so many injuries, so many moving parts. Like the NFL, like they watch, they know what's going on, they see the roster, they see the moving parts, and they respect that McVay's still getting guys out here to compete. And like it wasn't like a total letdown today. It just felt like different levels to it. But on that note, check out my story on the McVay, Staley, little rivalry, them having a reunion, on Sunday, and just being fierce competitors. And like you mentioned, it's nice to see your coach and tree doing well. And sometimes when you're a teacher, you want to see the student do well. I want to say I feel like all his students are older too, by the way, which is weird to call, because
Yeah,
McVay's still like 36 or 37, so,
yeah,
which is not even that much older than I am. So,
yeah.
uh, but yeah, check out my story at the OC Register. Also, check out my coworkers, Elliot Tedford. He had the Charger side, so he kind of covered a little bit of Rams too. I definitely touched on the Cam Akers surge and what he's doing right. Like Cam Akers, like besides saying he wants to be around for life, he just doesn't really know how to explain what he's doing out there. He's like, I'm just kind of just locked in. Like, what else do you want me to say? But Baker Mayfield, Sean McVay had high praise for him, so I touched on that. So yeah, and also kind of the batter run defense a little bit. So check out the story, and always check out my work at the OC Register. Follow me on Twitter at gmanzano24, and check out all the shows here on Compass on the Beat.
Yeah, and before we go, I just want to say if you want more Rams content, we get into it on Compas on the Beat. Fernando usually has a segment on there where he talks about what he's seen from his perspective on the Rams, and then you also get Gilbert who talks about the Chargers and their perspective. So if you want more content there, and then we also got you covered on TikTok, we got you covered on Twitter. We got you covered everywhere here. So with that, Gilbert closes out. It's been a good show. We had Gato here having a conversation with us as we did the
Yeah.
show. So hopefully, as you talked about, we have more people on next week as they take on the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, got the holding it down. We also have a couple cats too, Victor and myself.
Mm.
So it's pretty
Yes,
fitting. But on
yes.
the week 18, the final game of the season to close out House of Horns and close out the 2022 season of the Rams. Ya nos vamos, pues, vámonos.